In this video, I'm going to be discussing the heart and specifically the flow of blood through the heart. And the very first place we're going to start is where all of the deoxygenated blood is going to be coming from. And there are two main sources of this. The first source is called the superior vena cava, and its job is to deliver all of the deoxygenated blood from the upper half of the body. And we're also going to have the inferior vena cava, and its job is to collect all of the blood coming up from the lower half of the body. And the two vena cava will dump all of their deoxygenated blood into the receiving area called the right atrium. And in buildings, the atrium is a gathering place for people, and in the heart, the atria are places where blood gathers. And from the right atrium, what's going to happen is the blood will pass through something called the AV valve to enter the right ventricle. And the job of the right ventricle is to give enough pressure to that fluid, because all of the blood that has gotten to this point is now under pretty low pressure because it's already traveled throughout the entire body and back into the heart. So the right ventricle needs to create enough pressure on this fluid to force it through this dicupsid valve into something that's called the pulmonary artery. And the pulmonary artery is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood, but the reason it's called an artery is because it's carrying blood away from the heart. So arteries away. Arteries are carrying blood away from the heart, and in this case, it happens to be deoxygenated blood. And from the pulmonary artery, it's going to enter the lungs. Within the lungs, it's going to be gas exchanged within the alveoli. And then once it's been oxygenated and the carbon dioxide has been removed, it will travel through the pulmonary vein. And the reason it's called a vein is because the veins are carrying, or any vessel that carries blood towards the heart. And so within the pulmonary veins, they will enter the left atrium. And after they've gathered in the left atrium, they will pass through another AV valve to enter the left ventricle. And the left ventricle is the strongest, biggest muscle within your heart. And the reason for that is because the left ventricle's job is to create enough pressure. It's going to compress that bloodstream so hard that it's going to generate enough force to push the blood out to the rest of your body. And so in this case, the left ventricle is usually the biggest part of your heart. And what you're going to find is it's going to get pushed through another valve into the aorta. And the aorta is your biggest artery that exists in your body, and it contains a protein called elastin. And the purpose of that elastin protein, as the name implies, is to be elastic. In other words, its job is to store that pressure energy, that pressure potential energy that's generated by your left ventricle when it compresses down on the fluid. And the aorta will expand and be under enormous pressure once this left ventricle compresses. And what will happen next is this initial segment of your aorta is called the ascending aorta. This part here is called your aortic arch. And from the aortic arch, you're going to be going down, called the descending aorta. And the purpose of this is to supply oxygenated blood to the lower half of the body. And we also have additional arteries traveling upwards towards the superior upper half of the body to deliver blood to the brain and arms. And this is going to be an overview of the heart. What we also see here, this middle region of the heart, is called the septum. Its job is to separate the four chambers, and the evolution of the septum, if you're taking a zoology class, was very important because in many species of animals, in many phyla, we were seeing that the septum was gradually getting longer and longer in size, and hearts are becoming more and more efficient. And the reason the septum is so important is because it separated the oxygenated from deoxygenated blood within the heart, and this let the heart have a much better performance and allow organisms to have much higher metabolic rates, because you can get a lot more oxygenated blood to more parts of the body more quickly. And finally, if you look at this outer wall of the heart, this is called the myocardium. And if you're dissecting a cadaver in lab, what you'll commonly find is that this heart is pretty idealized, but surrounding this whole heart is something called the pericardium. And it's this epithelial tissue layer that is just surrounding everything, so you'll need to cut through that before you can actually cut the heart in half. And this bottom point of the heart is called the apex. And you'll also have the pulmonary trunk, which you'll see if we weren't looking at a cross section. And so that's going to wrap things up for this video on a basic anatomy of the heart and the flow of blood through it. I hope you guys find it useful, and thanks for watching.